Good afternoon. We'll call to order the study session for the City Council of Farmers Branch on the afternoon of October the 11th. Our first item on the agenda is to discuss the regular agenda items, but we should point out that the mayor is absent today. He is on business away out of town, and also Councilwoman Williams is also out of town. She's actually out of the country. She may join us on the study session, the executive session through the links that are provided to her. So those may occur later in the afternoon. So we'll go around the room here. We'll start with Mr. Jackson.
No questions at this time, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Driscoll?
Same here, no questions right now, thanks.
Very good. Mr. Rowan?
Yeah, I just have one question about H7 for appointing a city liaison to the Metro Crest Hospital Authority. I thought Tracy was already on that. I was trying to figure out if maybe I misunderstood that, or if there was a term that ended, or what happened there.
When I went back and researched that, I did not find where any appointment was made at the June meetings.
Okay.
that occurred this year.
Okay, understood. No other questions?
All right, and then part of that, we also should, because that item is on the consent agenda, we should have some discussion on the Planning and Zoning Commission vacancy at the moment as well. So we'll do that in just a moment. I did have one question, and I'll make sure on regular agenda I get it on the right item. Mr. Samuels, this is for you related to the technology. I believe that's the software license agreement with Rapid7 on item H8, is that correct?
I have item H8 is the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement, and then H4 is the Rapid7.
Okay, H4, pardon me. So H4, how many endpoints does the city have? Because I saw where we needed to have 80% of the endpoints on the system to operate.
Yeah.
How many endpoints do we have? And that's the only
About
question.
550. Yeah, about 550.
550, thank you very much. That's the only question I had. Thank you. All right. So let's then move to the appointment of the vacancy on the planning and zoning. We had two, let me get my notes here. There were a list provided to us. Discussion amongst the,
Which item was that? I'm sorry. I just got behind turning paper.
H7,
H7,
Thank you.
my apologies.
No, I just wasn't following. Go ahead.
Mr. Jackson, you were going to start.
Thank you. So we're going to make a recommendation for an appointment to P and Z,
Right.
right, from our list of candidates. And then secondly, we're going to, one of us, I guess, volunteer to be the Metro Crest Hospital Authority liaison, right? To make sure.
That is my understanding as well, and I had the same understanding that Councilmember Roman had, that Tracy was already on that list, and we may not have physically made that selection at our prior meeting. That was my understanding.
that was my understanding as well, that she was the liaison for that.
So I think it may be, and I'm looking down at the city attorney representative, that we just need to formalize that.
That sounds like what's going on, for sure. Yeah,
All right,
Unless there's somebody else that has interest.
unless there's someone else that is interested.
that's true too. You don't,
Correct.
you wouldn't be bound, but you can take the regular action just to appoint her now and formalize it.
Okay.
Based on your comment, are you inferring that someone else has interest?
No.
Okay, very good, thank you.
I'm interested, but I'll yield to, if she's already on there and we just didn't formalize that decision, then I'll yield to that customer.
Again, that was my understanding of the discussion.
Yeah.
So, all right,
For P and Z, I'd like to nominate Michael Rogan on P and Z. He was the only one that had listed, let me find my list here. He had P and Z as his number one choice.
Right.
I know he served previously on other boards and commissions, longtime Farmers Branch resident, so I'd be in full support of Mr. Rogan being on P and Z.
Very good. Mr. Driscoll?
Yes, I know both of the gentlemen under consideration, and as Councilman Jackson said, Mr. Rogan has served on the ZBA, and then he's been on the redistricting committee recently, and they both would do a good job. However, I would really like to recommend Mike McGinnis. He did, of course, get his degree at the U.S. Air Force Academy and spent his career as an Air Force officer and pilot, but he did get his degree in urban geography. And even years ago, when I was on planning and zoning, I used to have discussions with him and he would ask me a lot of questions about things going on in the city, developments, what do you need to do at SUP, et cetera, et cetera. And he also attended our strategic, initiative meeting earlier in January this year, as well as the half a Saturday, went into the afternoon meeting with Rick Cole on new urbanism we had also in January. And then he's attended some of our planning and zoning field trips also this year. Even though he wasn't on P&Z, he just came as an interested citizen. So he would be my recommendation.
Very good.
I remember when we talked about this back in May, and I remember it came down to two people, a lady from District 1 and I believe Michael, who you advocated for. And so I thought about that conversation. I thought he'd be a great person to add, given the conversation we had back in May. So I'd be in favor of Michael Rogan.
I've had an opportunity to talk to both, one through text and one through a telephone conversation. I'm in agreement with Mr. Driscoll. Either one would do a fine job. I think that in conversations with Mr. McGinnis, his background is one that intrigues me, seemingly to add some value and experience, educated experience in that particular space. So of the two, I'd be leaning towards Mr. McGinnis as well. So we're apparently 2-2 at the moment. Any discussion to change anyone's perspective?
I would just suggest, Mr. Merritt, that Mike Roman's primary interest is on planning and zoning, and he has that experience on the ZBA. If Mr. McGinnis's primary interest was in the planning and zoning, then I would expect to see that as primary interest. But I think it's a little bit unfair for Mr. Rogan to count, the trip over to Richardson and such as part of a credentialing or credibility in this process, because Mr. McGinnis was invited by you to join that trip at a time when he was campaigning to be city council member. So I don't really see that as a qualification, albeit interest. Mr. Rogan has far more years of service and experience that I would consider to be a little more advantageous for this role.
Fair enough. Any comments?
Nope.
Well, there are two options. We can table this, or we can try to figure out if there is an opportunity to change anyone's minds this afternoon. Doesn't sound like the latter is going to happen. So I suggest that we table this until we're all present and go from that perspective.
And if I might suggest that for the future one, I know that in May, when we were reviewing everybody to be on boards and commissions, we had their resume, application, whatever they submitted to be considered, that might be added. It wasn't on here, and I don't have my packet because it got recycled, but that might be helpful, because I just recalled our conversation and said, well, Michael's it, and didn't really give it much thought. But if I have the information that they've submitted to be considered for their commission, then,
Fair ask.
yeah.
And if I may, one action you may be able to take tonight is we do have, with the vacancy, we have our alternates that typically are going to move up. If we could at least activate that part of it, that will have a voting member
Yeah.
on planning and zoning. I know that would be very helpful for our planning team.
Okay.
That would be Marcus and Sabrina, each moving up.
We're gonna take that off consent then, and change the verbiage, or just make sure it's read?
Counselor, what is your recommendation on that?
We'll figure that out.
Okay.
I'd prefer maybe the language being adjusted for
Well, it
consent.
certainly will be, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll just figure out if we'll take it off consent or not. I think we can still do it on consent, I just have to pencil it
Okay.
when we're
I would be in favor of us moving both of the alternates up, though, because they are one person short on P and Z, and, you know, they're, I think they're probably meeting next week. I'm not quite sure. I haven't looked at the schedule, but I think we should act on that. And to your point about we have 2 to 2 right now, I think it's for better governance if maybe we table that, and then when we're a little bit undermanned or understaffed today on council, when folks are back, maybe to look at that then.
Very good.
I think that would be the fairest option.
All right. Any other discussion there? Are we okay from,
Yeah, and we want to continue with the MetroCrest Hospital as well, so we'll take care of that.
correct? All right. That then moves us to item A2, which is to receive a Recreation Board biannual update.
All righty, good afternoon. My name is Bob Stewart, and I chair the Parks and Rec Board. And so it's I always enjoy doing this biennial update to everybody. So let me start off with, let's see, how do you flick this thing over? Just go to the right? So I always like to start off with our mission and vision. I like to bring that up every time, and especially now that we have two new members on the council since I did the last update. And so our mission is to make recommendations pertaining to the operations of park facilities and recreation programs. And our vision is to be continuously aware of what the needs of the community are. So we're always looking at repurposing, adapting our parks, coming up with new ideas, because the needs of our community is constantly changing as people are moving in and out or as they grow. So we're big dreamers on the park board. So there's nothing that we won't try to do or talk about. So I want to start off with the events that we've had during the last 6 months. So Independence Day is always, everybody loves that. The in-your-face fireworks. We had over 6,700 people show up for that. Of that, about 4,400 were residents, and our revenue was about $28,000. And then Didn't Drive Live, we averaged about 600 in attendance. Our revenue was around $5,300. We had to cancel the July event because the heat index was a killer, and we didn't want to have people falling apart out there. And then Family Night for the spring and summer was very successful. In fact, our May event hit a record number of attendance at 3,800 patrons. Encanto, the movie, was a huge hit. And then the summer event, we had around 1,650 people. So once it gets a little bit hotter, the attendance goes down a little bit. And the revenue for both events was around $10,000. And then in the Bark Park, we had a backyard water bark. It's hard to say that, backyard water bark. And we had about 200 humans and a whole bunch of hounds. We had a free lemonade stand run by the TLP, which is the team leadership program for the Summer Sunshine program. And then we also had microchipping available, put on by the animal shelter. And then Viva Farmers Branch, the attendance this year was like 1,600 people. It's double what it was last year. So that is really a growing event. And we had over $4,500 in revenue. And so I got upcoming the Spooky Pooch, but it was this past weekend, and we had over 500 people attend that. So that's, our Bark Park has just been a tremendous asset to the city that place there'd probably be dogs in that place 24 hours a day if we'd let them. So upcoming events, we got, of course, the Blooming Bluegrass Festival, which is October 14th and 15th. Halloween in the Park, which is a huge event. And this year we're going to have brews and booze. So that'll be a lot of fun. Then Veterans Day comes up on November the 11th. And then we'll culminate the year with the Christmas tree lighting on December the 3rd. So some examples of our success for 2022. So with the Recreation Department, our overall revenue was 60% over 2021. So it's been a banner year. Our membership was up 88%, our program revenue 70%, rental revenue, and the summer funshine, we had over 300 kids, and that generated over $286,000 in revenue. With the aquatic center, they had all-time highs in all the areas. Their overall revenue was up 12%, but their membership was up 30%. Program revenue, you can see the rental revenue, frog pond attendance was up 8% over the previous year. And all this was done without any fee increases. So we're just getting a lot more people come during the summertime. So our updates in the future, so the John Burke Preserve, it's still on schedule to be completed by December of this year. Hoya will begin demolition work in late November, early December, and is still on schedule to be completed by 2023. A lot of you were at the sand volleyball opening over at Montgomery Park, which is really that's a prime example of how we repurposed an area. And you can see that we've got benches, it's covered. I think the next thing on the docket is to add a couple pickleball courts. It's not a picture here, but the hockey rink conversion is underway at Orengood Park, so that's another area that we repurposed. Mercer Park, over on the west side, we're waiting to hear back from the developer on the grading, so TMP can develop engineered drawings, so that's still a work in progress. Rec Center, Phase 2 renovations are currently underway. And then we list on there the other thing, the event center and the branch connection, but that's under the senior advisory board. So I just want to list that as stuff that's coming up in the future. So that's pretty much it for that. Do you have any questions?
Questions for Mr. Stewart?
Well, usually you always have something to ask.
Very good.
Just a compliment. Great
All right.
job. This has been a great story. The board got so involved in the master plan for the Parks
Yeah.
Department, and we're seeing the fruits of that now. I'm so proud of that volleyball part. That was done 100% in-house by our Parks and Rec staff. And it is, if you drive by there at night, it's always being used.
The-
Great job.
Another thing, great thing, when we had that 8-inch rainstorm, didn't affect that at all. The drainage was perfect. You'd think something like that would get washed out in the street if it was done by anybody other than our guys at the Parks and Rec Department, but it just held up really well.
I don't have any questions, Bob, but I'd just like to also commend you for your work in leading the Parks and Rec group. And I know we've got several members that are here today, and I don't think we could add much to your presentation here, but it's always exciting when you meet new people.
Yep.
They always talk about the parks in Farmers Branch, and even people that are coming from pretty far away in other places. And you guys have just done a terrific job. And as you said, particularly repurposing some of the older parks. And it's nice that we can always point with pride to our parks. And a lot of cities have parks, but they don't invest in them and keep them up. Yeah, so just a job well done.
Thank you. So I've got one other thing for you guys that kind of segued into this for me. So this may have been in your packets, but
Thank you.
let me give you.
The engagement report.
So this is a survey put out by the National Recreation and Park Association. Excuse me. Thank you. And I won't take up too much of your time, but I really read through this several times, and I just want to kind of hit on some of the highlights. So every year, they call it the NRPA, does a survey to understand how people are connecting with their parks and recreations. And some of the highlights that I took away is parks and recreation is not a luxury. It's an indispensable part of the infrastructure in our city. 84% of adults look for high-quality parks and recreation when choosing a place to live. That's probably, behind school systems, that's probably their number 2 reason for moving to a community. 9 in 10 people agree that parks and recreation is an important service provided by their local government. More than half of U.S. adults have personally or have a family member that has participated in some recreation this year. And so I came up with the 4 main reasons people visit parks and recreation facilities: being with family and friends, exercise, getting away from all that stress during your workday, and just being closer to nature. So I just wanted to kind of pass this out, and I've got some other copies if some other people would like to look at it. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Very good.
I don't know why my voice starts to shake when I get to the end of a presentation. I guess because I just don't like that it's over.
All right. Thanks again, Mr. Stewart. All right, we'll move on to agenda item A3 this afternoon, which is to review proposed updates to the property maintenance code and business code. And this was brought forth by a number of council people, including Mayor Dye, myself, Mr. Driscoll, and Mr. Roman. So I wanted to make sure that we're all aware that this is the item we've brought forth. Mr. Bonanno.
Good afternoon, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
When I first started here, I would have never been able to find that folder. Very proud of myself. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
He thanks you, and we all thank you.
Okay, Leo Bonanno, Deputy Director of Neighborhood Services. As Mr. Merritt said, we are here to review several items that I was asked to bring forward for some of you several months ago, in beginning of August. And so I just want to make sure, I did things a little bit differently this time because we are talking about a couple of different laws, and my PowerPoint would have been filled with legal language, and I think it would have been unbearable to read and look through. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands how this works. The PowerPoint obviously is up on the screen and looks like this. There is another document in your package that looks like this. So the PowerPoint goes through some of the things that we discussed and some of the things I'm recommending to you based on what we discussed. But most of the actual language changes are in this document here. I just thought, again, filling a PowerPoint with this language would have been an awful lot for everybody to read. And I know that some of you like the red line version of things, and it's just easier to do in a Word format. So I will try and keep everybody on the same page by doing a little bit of bouncing back and forth. But if anyone needs any help understanding where we are in either document, don't hesitate to ask me. So, as I stated at the beginning of August, a number of you did ask me to bring forward and explain some of the current codes that we had, and then a number of you had comments based on what currently exists in the law and suggested a number of changes, and so those changes, we'll go over a bit of those today. I wanted to take one moment and explain why we bother going through this process. When I say we, I mean me and the Code Enforcement Task Force, my first year here, went through the entire property maintenance code and essentially tossed out what existed and created something new based on a lot of their recommendations. The reason why we review ordinances, the many reasons why, the community changes over time, and the desires of the community and the citizens also change as the demographics change, as the needs of the community change. And so we always want to make sure that the laws we have in place are current and valid and reflect what everyone is hoping to get out of them. So that's probably reason number one, is just to make sure what's in the law is still what everybody wants. That's probably the easiest explanation. And then you get into some other reasons like, over time, technology changes, tools change. Should we take that into account when we update the law? Are there new problems we never faced before that need to be added into the law or addressed somehow in the law? Is there language in the law that we no longer need? That's a big one, especially for me, because most cities don't do it. If there's language in the law you don't need, it needs to come out, in my opinion, because all it does is clutter things up. It makes things harder to find when you want to find something you do need. So removing language that's obsolete is, in my opinion, just as important as having the right language in there. We also have other things, common things. You find typos and other things as we use the law. Sometimes typos are harmless. Sometimes typos can change the entire context of a regulation. A misplaced comma or period can do no damage or tremendous damage. So as you discover those, thankfully we don't have any major ones like that, but as you find things that need corrections, you should correct them at the appropriate time. Since the property maintenance code is now over a year old and we're looking at it again, this is the perfect opportunity to address all of these things as we update it. So the first topic we talked about last time we were together was solid waste and recycling cart storage. And under the current law, the law allows carts to be stored not in front of the home when they are not out for pickup. And that kind of phrasing caused a bit of confusion for some folks around town. And this was something Mr. Merritt brought up was, is there some way to make this more clear to everyone, because we're having some folks interpret things differently. And if you remember, last time we were together, I had these little diagrams to help everyone explain what the current law allows. So in this example, the front yard, as the law reads now, is off limits. So the front yard, what we have here, is off limits for cart storage. The front area is off limits. And there it is again. Between the front face of the building and the street is off limits for cart storage. And when we last talked about it, the sentiment was, you know what, you get houses, especially this one, you get houses of a certain shape, and even though that cart down at the bottom is illegal, there's a cart 3 feet away that is perfectly legal. And folks don't like that. The whole point of this regulation was to limit the visibility of carts. And that one down there in the crook of the L there is still very visible. And that isn't what people were hoping would come out of the law. And so those of you that night discussed it, and it was determined that, you know what, instead of saying from the front of the building to the street is off limits, what about from anywhere between the building and the street is off limits? I talked about this a little bit off to the side with Mr. Merritt, to try and get the language right. But that's where I ended up landing was, had we gone a different way, a new definition would have been needed, and it would have been more changes than necessary. So the suggestion that I came up with is, and it's in your package there on page 2, is to say that a cart between the primary structure and the road that it's addressed on is off limits. So all of a sudden, 1, 2, 3 are off limits now, between the house and the street it's addressed on. The side is still okay, the rear would be okay if I had a cart there. But now this created another question for me, which was, we do have houses on corner lots. If the goal is to limit visibility, well, we've handled the street you're addressed on, but what about the side street? And so you'll see that question mark there. I wasn't sure what you all wanted to do about corner lots. Do we care that much because it's not in front of the home? Is that too visible? If this trash cart here is unacceptable to you, then we would change the language again. And instead of saying, a cart can't be stored between your building and the street you're addressed on, the language would say the cart can't be stored between your building and any adjacent right-of-way. So that's a question I have for you today in order to finish this discussion, is how we feel about the corner lots. Okay? Would you like me to keep going, or did you want to stop here? Or?
How would you like to proceed? You want to let him finish and we can return and ask questions in total?
I'd prefer
4 or 5?
going through it subject by subject.
Yes.
He said 4 or 5 questions total, so you want to wait till the end or go one at a time? It's up to you.
I've heard two that would like to do it independently. All right, let's do it now.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Jackson, you go first.
I like the language that keeps the cart from being visible from the house to any adjacent street, because it's within the spirit of trying to remove the unsightly carts.
Mr. Driscoll.
I would be in favor of keeping the language, I think, as you've currently proposed it, between the front of the house. And I'm just thinking, if we try to do it that way, first of all, there's not that many corner lots. And I'm thinking also the large proportion of our population that are elderly. And I know a lot of people in that category have talked about it's kind of a burden, hauling the cart back and forth, et cetera. So I'm not in favor of making it more complicated and more of a burden on folks.
Mr. Rowe.
I think, when I read through the packet, and the way I was thinking about this was, what's the original intent of this ordinance? What's the original intent of the discussion that we're having? And that's to minimize the visibility of these trash cans. And so I would be in favor of your proposal to make sure that in this example, Rainy Day Lane and Sunshine Street, you could not have the trash can visible from either of those streets. And I think that still gives you one side of your house or the back to be able to put your trash cans away, to address kind of the concern for seniors. I think that's a good compromise there. Half of your house can be used, in this situation, half of your house can be used for storage, and half of the house, you can't use it for storage of the dumpster.
Well, you and I talked, Leo, and I was comfortable with the approach. It addresses the majority of the concerns. We've had the opportunity to see how the implementation of this has gone. This is an opportunity to move in the right direction. I think we don't have many corner lots. We do have some. I think this is a step in the right direction. I'm comfortable with either approach. If it's easier for you to do it now with adjacent streets, let's do that. But I was comfortable with the front. But if it's just a single administrative change, let's just go ahead and make it.
Okay.
If I may just add, most homes have a fence of some sort. And a lot of homes that are like on this type of a corner have fences on the side. So I'm thinking also of the job of your enforcement officers, and aren't you going to get then people saying, well, look, it's on the side of the house, but I have a fence, it's behind the fence, or it's behind shrubs, or, other barriers. So again, I hear from people a lot, like, why are things so complicated, and why, they don't, yeah. So,
I would just say we're looking at one shape of a house. There are multiple shapes of homes on corner lots. And so we need to consider all of those homes, but the spirit of the new regulation is we don't want the trash cans visible from the street. And to me, that does make it a lot easier for residents to understand, because if we do it the other way and say, well, it can't be visible from the front face of your house, but it can be visible to this other street, that makes it more complicated in my mind. So I'd just say,
Keep,
any street.
keep in mind, Mr. Johnson, what we're talking about is storage, not visibility.
Correct.
So, for example, if I can step away for just a second, if this cart were here, it would be fine.
Right.
And you could probably see it from the street,
Right.
Exactly.
but it's not in between a building and the road. So I just want to make sure everybody's clear that,
Understood.
you know, that you're still going to be able to see a few, you know,
Sure.
that's, so, okay, just want to make sure you understand that, okay?
I just wanted to point that out as well, that if, you know, you're talking like from the front of the house, if it's over on Rainy Day Lane, it's relatively further back from the front of the house. It's not between the front of the house and the street. But if it's around the corner, 3 feet, 4 feet, it's completely visible. And again, I just think it's going to create more havoc and confusion. And people say, well, look, I have it on the side of the house, and why are you picking on me? And everyone else has got them on the side of their house. They are visible. And I just think, you know, we don't need to overcomplicate things. And while we're a city, we need certain rules and regulations. We're not an HOA. And so I think that's going too far. And again, most homes have fences, shrubs, barriers. It's usually, that's already part of the backyard on a lot of those houses.
And if, I'll just remind all of you that if it's not visible from the right-of-way, it doesn't exist in our world, in code enforcement world. So just keep that in mind too. If it's behind a fence, behind a bush enough that we can't see it, it doesn't exist to us. A neighbor might see it from a kitchen window or something, but if we can't see it from the right-of-way, it's not real. So keep that in mind too.
Yeah, but you get into situations where, well, the shrub's 2 feet tall and the cart's 3 feet tall.
Yeah.
So the person says, I'm in compliance, and so I just think it brings another bag of worms and problems for you guys,
Sure.
personally.
Are we comfortable with where we landed?
Can you clarify where we landed?
Yeah.
I can.
Okay.
Thank you.
2 are in favor of the right-of-way language, 1 is flexible, and 1 prefers front of the house, and 1 is not here. I think he said flexible, meaning he could go either way.
That's
Which, if I was drafting it, I would lean towards right-of-way, being 2.5, basically. So that's where we are. Maybe Tracy, or she wants to weigh in separately to the questions, that'd be fine with me too.
That's certainly, it's a discussion point that we can carry on, and I will reach out to Tracy and have her contact you.
Okay.
How's that?
That would be great.
Okay.
All right, we'll go that route.
Thank you.
All right.
The next topic of interest was rain barrels. And before I get into this, I wanted to thank, I don't know if anybody's here from the Sustainability Committee, but the Sustainability Committee did some work on this topic for us. Alex, are you here? Yep. No? Not yet? Oh, there you are. Alex Farmakis is the Sustainability Manager for the city, and he's also the liaison for the Sustainability Committee. So he helped me greatly, and the committee helped me greatly with what you're about to see, so I just wanted to say thank you to them before I forgot. But we did talk about rain barrels our last time together. We have no regulations on rain barrels. They would be covered in the outside storage ordinance, and if you remember, the outside storage ordinance says any outside storage is illegal unless you're on this list. And it lists about 20 things, 22 things. Well, rain barrels aren't listed there, so they're not exempt, so they're illegal. So this topic came up, do we allow rain barrels or not? Should we? The city is obviously making a push towards being more sustainable. The general public is interested in sustainability as well. So these are some of the questions that I posed to the committee through Alex. Things like, should rain barrels be allowed in public view? How many should someone be allowed to have, and where should they be? Should they be physically connected to a gutter system? Some are and some aren't. And should they have a certain design or shape or style? If you've ever looked at rain barrels, they can go from almost artisan style, like they're beautiful pieces of art, to industrial barrels, which in my opinion are hideous. And so you've got like this huge gambit of rain barrel style. And so where do we land on all that? So on page 2 of your handout, again, that's this one, I came up with some language for you based on what the Sustainability Committee gave to me. There was one item that I did not sign on to that the Sustainability Committee gave me, and I'll explain why. The original answers I got, and it's mainly that public view question. And it's the second one too. So how many rain barrels should we allow and where should they be? Well, the Sustainability Committee's answer to those questions was, how about at most 2 and in front of the house at either downspout? And my language that I'm presenting to you today does not say that, because I was concerned that we would feel the same about rain barrels as we do about carts, not in front of the house. So I did not take that particular recommendation from them. I moved to treat them like carts and push them to the sides. Don't know how you all feel about that, but that was my assumption that you might all want to go in. So that's one suggestion from them that I didn't take, but I believe I took all the others from them. They did a great job, so. So if you review page 2 of your document, you'll see the language that I am proposing. Again, it's brand new. It does not exist currently. And if you read that language, these are some examples of what are and are not allowed. So the language mainly calls, here's what we're trying to avoid is, and this is also a comment the Sustainability Committee made, is obviously they're for rain barrels, but they do not want them to become an issue to the point where we should get rid of those. You know, they want to encourage their use, but they don't want it to be a big thing, for lack of a better phrase. Okay, so one of my goals when writing the language was, and based on my experience, makeshift rain barrels that aren't really rain barrels, we had to find some way to eliminate those. And so one of the ways that I decided to do that was to include things like, you can see pre-made rain barrels. Well, you know what? I have a mouse. Pre-made rain barrels have spigots, plugs, spigots, and so on. They're made to not only collect water, but to distribute it. Makeshift rain barrels don't typically have that, or they will have it, but you can see someone did it after they bought it. Like they super glued a spigot to a garbage can, which you will see here. It's real. I got a photo of it. I'm not making it up. So based on the language I've given to you, a 50-gallon container with a spigot would qualify under the definition of rain barrel. 45 gallons with a spigot and a plug. These are also fine. The one on the left is collapsible. It can actually, after it's emptied out, it can actually fold down and be stored away. I thought that was kind of neat, but there's nothing in the law I drafted to prohibit it, so FYI. The one on the right is also acceptable. It's a little bit more industrial looking, but it would fly under the current definition. Okay? And then we have some that are not acceptable. The definition for a rain barrel states that it's covered. If it doesn't have a cover on it, it's not a rain barrel, it's a bucket, in my opinion. Okay? There's a garbage can with, I'm sorry.
Spigot.
Thanks, spigot, and that's not a spigot, is it? That's a nozzle, or you know what? I don't know. I'm not an engineer. But yeah, your nozzles, your turns. This was it started off light as a garbage can, and now it's being used as a rain barrel. That's not going to fly. So this wasn't originally constructed, and that is in the language, by its manufacturer to collect water. This one is too large, even though it's very nice to look at. It's over the limit of 60 gallons. And this one is, again, very nice, but it's located in the front of the house, which I did not opt to allow. So I will mention one thing while we're on this slide. You can limit the size of a rain barrel. The law I gave you says 60 gallons just because I did a lot of shopping around and I tried to look for reasonable sizes, something that I thought would be considered reasonable, but again, that's very subjective. But if you put yourself in the position of a code officer at the road, we have no idea whether that's 65 or 60 or 55. So that is an issue. We may get complaints, that water barrel is too large, and we would really have no way of confirming that. I guess we could research it, we could try to find it online, but then again, that one on the left comes in several different models, 50, 55, and 60, and 65. So how would we know which one we're looking at? So as far as enforcement goes, size would be an issue for us, probably 9 times out of 10. So So that was it on rain barrels. And again, you have the recommended language for this topic in your document there.
Same as we did last time, go around the room differently. Ron?
So, the concern you brought up about us being able to enforce the size of it is the same issue I had with, like, mosquitoes. Like, how would we know if it's attracting mosquitoes? And, you know, I guess I'm looking for, like, the teeth of the ordinance. How would we be able to enforce something like that? Or, because I can see somebody, a neighbor, seeing another neighbor who's got a rain barrel, and they're walking, you know, to their backyard from around their house, and suddenly they see a collection of mosquitoes near that area. And I could see how somebody could become upset and file a complaint, and, well, that's on a private property, and how could you see that from the sidewalk or something, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, in that instance, if that were to happen, what could your office do?
The definition that I created for you all says that a rain barrel is a covered container. So I believe in most cases from the road, we would be able to see a cover.
Okay.
I'm guessing.
Yeah, or mesh.
Yes, which is a kind of cover,
Yeah.
right? So if your downspout is just dumping water through a mesh top, that would be okay because the mosquitoes couldn't get through the mesh to the water where they lay their eggs. Now, if there is a concern about stagnant water, mosquito laden water, that would actually get forwarded to our public health folks, and they can investigate. And I'm sorry, I don't know exactly all of their processes, but we do offer those pucks to households, those free mosquito dunks and things. So I'm sure they would encourage the homeowner to use them. They don't damage flowers or plants or anything like that. So your question is a good one, and it would be tricky. But from code enforcement standpoint, if it's got a cover and it meets the definition of rain barrel and it satisfies everything else, we would leave it alone. But if someone said, I believe that water is stagnant or it has mosquitoes, we would send it to the public health office and they would investigate. They have their own inspectors.
Okay.
So,
Sounds good. And then, will you remind me if in what you wrote, it covers, when you were talking, I wasn't sure, and I was trying to look for it, but couldn't find it. How can we make sure that rain barrel is actively being used for the purpose that it's intended and not for collection of trash or anything other than the collection of water? And I get there will be droughts, and so there will be times where it will be empty, but to prevent people from using it as something else.
based on, again, the language, I forced rain barrels to be on the sides rather than the front. So imagine a non-opaque container with a lid on it. We have no idea what's inside it, really, at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
So to answer your question, we would not be able to tell. They could be using it to store water, it could be storing trash, it could be anything.
Yeah.
And if you're allowing rain barrels, then that's one of the risks that you run. Now, personally, I don't see anybody spending, a couple of hundred, in some cases, dollars on a container to store trash. That seems a little weird. But I wouldn't put it past some folks with all the experience I have in code enforcement. You'd be surprised what people do. But to answer your question, frankly, we wouldn't be able to tell. So.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Mr. Driscoll.
Question I have, Leo. I'm not an expert on gutters, but I think a lot of people's gutters, I think, have the drain spout on the front of the house. Some have it on the side, some have it on the front. So you're saying, the tasteful manufactured rain barrels to be rain barrels with spigots, et cetera, and to meet one of our goals, which is to make the city more sustainable. And as we just know, we've been in a drought, and then we'll have a big rainstorm and get a ton of water, and then we won't have any for a month or two. So, number one, I think it's kind of ridiculous to have a limit of 60 gallons if, Home Depot and Lowe's are selling 65 gallons. I mean, if we want them to, the whole idea is conserving water and using less water from what we have to pay for. So I don't see that that makes sense personally. But then, again, if you have the drain spouts are going to be on the corners of the houses. And what are you going to do then when people say, well, I have a rain barrel, it's in front of my house, and so you have to move it 6 feet around to the side, but the drain spout's on the front. I mean, I don't think we want to make it complicated for you guys, and we certainly don't want to make it more complicated for our residents.
Yeah, and
Just what comes out to me when I,
No, totally understandable. And again, I just want to make sure you're all clear. When I pushed rain barrels to the side of the house, that was an assumption. I assumed that's what you would want because of the because of the cart discussion. Maybe you don't feel that way, and that is totally fine. So whatever you prefer is great. But it doesn't. We don't have a dog in the hunt. Code enforcement, we don't care. So that was an assumption on my part. I just thought that this council would feel the same way. Now, if you don't, if you believe that rain barrels are fine in the front, in a flower bed, I mean, whatever, we're fine with that too. But that was just a presumption by me. So, FYI.
And I'm sorry, I didn't answer that question for you, so you had at least my sentiments on it. I'm honestly a little bit indifferent about whether it's on the front or the side. I think if we start seeing any issues, then I think maybe we can convene and put a stop to that, but I don't really have a preference on whether we put it on the side, on the
Okay.
front, or both.
Okay, great.
Mr. Jackson, I'm assuming you're done.
well, if you take the picture you have here, that's obviously a rain barrel that, in my humble opinion, is tasteful. It's kind of blended in with their front yard or garden. You really got to look for it, I think, if you just walked by, you're
I agree.
walking your dog. And it's connected to the rain spout, and it's on the front of the house at the corner. So I think, people buy their homes and want to paint them this color and that color. And I mentioned before, I drove by a house in some other neighborhood a couple of months ago, and they had a pink front door. But I just think we can kind of go overboard on wanting to micromanage and micro-regulate everything. And why should it make a big difference, if it's on the side 3 feet or in the front 3 feet when it's designed for that purpose? And we want people to use less water and, use the rainwater, and it's good for your plants.
Sure.
Mr. Jackson.
My primary concern is maintenance, mosquitoes, a mesh wears out, they fall in, storm blows it off or something like that. So I like the idea of being able to have a rain barrel and use, runoff water. Rainwater is much better than tap water for plants and such. I do. I think that my secondary concern is in the spirit of the trash receptacles, in the spirit of many of our other codes, like parking cars in the front yard and that kind of thing, the attempt to have a nice, clean city and sort of have some uniformity to that is a good idea. Otherwise, we're probably going to have a whole lot of different things going on in front yards. I don't agree that the downspouts are always in the front. I would suggest that downspouts are often on the side because people generally don't like the downspouts showing in the front. So, if folks really want to have a rain barrel and use runoff rain for their plants and such, they can have gutters in the backyard with downspouts just as easily as they can in the front, and they can store their rain barrels in the backyard. So I'm not real passionate about this. I don't want to make our mosquito issue any worse than it already is, because it's bad already. And I think being consistent with our other code is a good idea. It keeps things less complicated.
I think there's a size issue is going to be sort of the teeth of the matter of enforcement. I think perhaps from a gallon's perspective, it might be more difficult to say if it's larger than 36 or 42 inches, something that you could simply measure might be, and who knows, this one here on the left, might be 36 inches tall, who knows? But it would be easier in that regard that you wouldn't necessarily have to put a gallon, description on it. I think, this idea, we're gonna find out that people have downspouts on all sides of their house. And it's just going to be a challenge to, say, oh, we're going to allow it, but you can only allow it in the backyard. I think we're going to have to look at, I know my wife will love to have, 60 gallons of water in the front yard and water our front. And so the idea, if it's tastefully done in one of these manufactured type approaches, that's fine. Do I want it to be, neon orange? Probably not, but that's a personal choice, painting a pink door. So we have to allow some flexibility, but we have to have some opportunity. So I'm comfortable with them being in the front as long as they're manufactured for that purpose. Because for the most part, they look very tasteful in that regard, rather than the industrial, aspect. People are gonna still put an industrial blue one, and I think you had that on a prior slide, because that's what's available to them. So it's a tough call, but I'm comfortable with managing the size by inches rather than gallons, and I'm okay with them if they're managed, and they're not moving like the trash cars, let's be honest. I mean, they're going to be stationary. They're not going to move it from one gutter to the next, one downspout to the next. So it becomes more a fixture of the home.
Taking away the gallon requirement and putting in place a height requirement, we'd have a better chance of enforcement with that. Not 100%, but we would have a better chance. From the road, I can tell the difference between 2 feet and 4 feet and 6 feet. A 6-foot fence, for example. When you're a code officer, you look at fences all the time, you know how tall 6 feet is. So that kind of helps us. So we'd have a better chance of enforcement with height instead of gallons, if that is something of interest to
And
the
I
rest
think
of you.
not only height, but width. Let's not be
Yeah, whatever.
facetious and have a water, storage tank that runs the full,
Right.
the full width
Yeah.
of this house. I mean, that's not the intent either. So more uniform in that regard.
Leo, I had a question. Is this something the Sustainability Committee is asking us to consider, or is this a topic that came up and we asked them for their opinion?
That, the second, the latter.
So there's
Yeah.
not a driving need?
No, from this actually, the conversation started when Mr. Cox was still here. And so this was on his list. I believe he was asked to give it to me by a council member. And so it got added to the list with all the others. But no, the Sustainability Committee was asked for input.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have one other question. What do other cities have as an ordinance for rain barrels? Did we look at that?
No, I didn't. I'll be honest, when it comes to outside storage, and you know what, I'll be very honest with all of you. Farmers Branch stands on its own in a lot of ways, especially in our world, in code world. So, and folks here are very engaged, and they know what they like and they know what they don't like in a lot of ways. So I tend to not research other cities unless I'm asked to do so, because we don't live there. We live here. And so who cares what, and this is just my opinion, so I mean no disrespect, but who cares what Plano's doing? Who cares what Frisco's doing? What is it that you all think? If Frisco is okay with this, are you telling me that you're okay with this? I find that hard to believe. No one in Farmers Branch would accept this. I've been here 2 years, which isn't very long, but I know the public here, this would never fly. So you're telling me that if Richardson allowed this, Farmers Branch would? I think not. So to answer your question, sir, no, I did not research other cities. To be frank, again, I only care about the people that live here. They're the ones that pay me. So unless one of you asks me to research other cities, I just don't.
I'd like you to.
Okay.
Because I think as a baseline to understand what other cities are doing,
Okay.
might help us get to point B a lot faster. There may be some code we can just copy and paste and it works for everybody. If it worked for Plano, it may work for us or it may not. We might want to be more restrictive. But I think not knowing what's going on around us and in other cities doesn't help us get this done.
Are there any cities in particular that, no? So we have like
Pick
a
some.
generic list, just random ones around us. Does that work?
Just pick some's fine.
Okay, okay.
Any other discussion on rain barrels, and Leo can move on? Seeing none,
Okay,
thank you.
sure. There is a section in the building code, obviously, that talks about when permits are required to do certain projects. What I would like to do is copy and paste essentially that language into the property maintenance code. And the reason for that is explained here. If you've ever read the building code, the building code is written by incredibly smart people at an international level, and it's technical as heck. The average person would have trouble. It's almost like reading a dictionary. It's very, very technical. The average person would struggle to read it. So when folks are, for example, written up for roof damage, and we tell them you not only need to fix your roof, but you need a permit to do so, it's not uncommon for them to say something like, where does it say that? And so we will tell them the building code, and the building code, being as technical as it is, will drag them down a rabbit hole where we then have to try and rescue them. It's just so complicated in some respects. The electrical code, the building code, the plumbing code, it's amazing. So what I would like to do, just for ease of use for the public, is to take the permit requirement in the building code and just take it and drop it, copy and paste it into the property maintenance code. So again, you only have to look at one code to come into compliance. Okay, here's what you have to do. Here's the permit requirement that says that. Everything you need is in one place. Those of you that were here when we rewrote the property maintenance code heard me say things like that. Like the ease of reading this kind of language is important to me. And anything we can do to make it a little less stressful. We do have a lot of folks that will get a notice in the mail and then do their own research. And I think that's great. If they want to do that, that's great. And they educate themselves. They call us up and say, well, the law says this and the law says that. And that's totally cool. But again, it can be really hard for people to do that, especially when you intertwine more technical codes. So all this is mainly a suggestion. I'd like to pull permitting requirements into the property maintenance code so it's all in one place. So that's all that is, okay? Garage sales were another topic. We currently have a few regulations on garage sales. The main concern when we last spoke was some folks getting a little out of control with them number-wise. Just constantly having them almost to the point where some people thought it was more of a business operation than a garage sale in the sense that most of us think about it. So garage sale regulations already exist in two different codes. 62, which is the sign code, and 58, which is the sales code. They actually contradict each other, so that's a problem in itself. That would need to be fixed regardless. My proposal that I made last time we were together, and I would still make, is to eliminate it from both places and put it in the business code. The business code. The reason being that I think that's where most people would look for it. It would also coincide with what I propose to be home occupations. I don't think, and we talked about this the last time we were together, I told you all garage sales were under the sign code. And as I was staring at you up on the dais last time, four faces got very confused, which is totally understandable. Why would garage sales be under the sign code? That makes no sense. And then I told you, well, garage sales have signs. And everyone went, oh. So I don't think it makes sense where it is. And so I think more people would look for it in the business code instead, because they are making money at a garage sale. So with that in mind, not only did I suggest moving it, but also the question of, well, how does code enforcement keep track of the garage sales to hold people accountable to the limit, whatever that limit is? And so, and I'm sorry, I forget who suggested it last time, but the topic of a registration came up. And so the language that you have on page 5 talks about requiring a garage sale registration. It would be free under the law the way it is suggested to you. And all it would do would help us count how many one household has going through the year. We would propose, what we would do is we would tie, I'm sorry, let me back up. The suggestion was, last time around, could we tie this to our permitting software and stuff like that to make it easy for folks to get? The answer is yes, but that will take some time. So what I would propose in the meantime was, I believe Mr. Jackson suggested a simple form online to just type in and submit. And it would help us keep track of them, and then we could manually enter them into our software until the online system is connected. So that would be my recommendation for doing it if we implement the registration before the software is ready online. So I think that's probably the easiest way to do it. Other than that, I don't recall any significant changes with the garage sale regulations I proposed. View obstructions and things like that are already in the property maintenance code. I just reiterated them in the garage sale code. So I don't recall anything substantial while I stand here with you on that. So it's the big topic here is registration. So.
Discussion?
Thank you for putting this together. I agreed with all of your recommendations for it. I do have one question. It was more of a scenario. I kind of was trying to think through how it would be implemented. And so, let's say there's a complaint about a garage sale, right? And they don't have a permit. I suppose the permit might be visible, similar like other permits, usually on the door or window or something. Okay. Let's say someone says, I don't see a permit. Who would they call? Is it FBTX? Is it 911? Who would it go to?
Yeah, well, most garage sales, obviously, we all know, are probably happening on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, right? Well, code enforcement does not currently have staff here on Saturdays, but I think I explained to you all last time I was here or the time before that Animal Services, which is now part of Neighborhood Services, has Mario, our famous Mario, who assists us on the weekends. So what would have to happen is, in order for a violation to be registered, one of the staff has to observe it themselves. So that could be either a code officer or an animal officer, any one of them. So if that were the case, we have several options. What I would probably do, especially since this would be a new requirement, is if we stumble upon or get a complaint for a garage sale with no registration, we could register it on the spot right there on the visit. Just register it, here you go, and that's number one for you, right? And the next time is number two. So just start the count, right? And then should a home cross the line, then that officer or animal control officer can step in a more official capacity and, okay, you've had your two for the year, this can't continue. So, I'll be back in an hour, you need to bring it, you need to shut it down, kind of thing. If it was a serious issue, we may or may not do it right up front, but the standard process would kick in, issuing a notice, issuing citations if we had to. You've had your limit for the year, you need to stop holding garage sales. And if we caught it again, people could end up in court over it, just like anything else. But up front, I think probably an educational approach is a little bit easier.
Yeah, and that's where I was going. You got it. You answered all. I was trying to one by one, and you went right there, and I was like, okay, all my questions have been
Nailed it.
answered. Yeah, that's where I was going. I was trying to, can we register people immediately? And it sounds
Yes.
like we do have that capability of doing that, and start keeping track of that. So I'm satisfied with my questions.
Great.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Driscoll?
I'm good, thank you.
Mr. Jackson?
Oh, good.
Okay.
Thank you, Leo.
Sure.
I think you've covered all the ground, and thank you
Okay.
for the questions. Those covered everything.
The last topic I believe I have for you is home occupations, and I want to make sure you understand I'm sorry, second to last, what I've given you here on page 7.
You went back.
Thank you. On page 6 and 7 of your document is all this green language, okay? The city has no regulations on home occupations with one exception. It says you can have them here and not here. That's it. Other than that, it's essentially a free-for-all. Well, the city's allowed to regulate home occupations, and so we have had some, I would say slight uptick in complaints about them in code enforcement. I would recommend that any city of a decent size have some kind of regulations for for home occupations. And so what I've provided to you here is not what I'm recommending the law to be. It's just a jumping off point. I've included some things I've seen in other cities. I've included some generic language. Mr. Jackson, I did look into Plano, Frisco, Denton for these, so because we were starting from scratch, and it can get this topic can get unwieldy. But essentially, there are 3 ways to address home occupations. You can list all the home occupations that are allowed, and then anything that's not allowed is prohibited. So you can go that route, but that list could be hard to maintain, but you could do it that way. The other way to do it is, for example, Plano's way, which is Plano lists all the behavior of a home occupation. So it doesn't list any occupation specifically, but it says you shall not create traffic, you shall not make noise, you shall not create odors. So unless you're breaking any of those, it's a free-for-all as well, free-for-all. What I have given you is option 3, which is a little both. I believe it's the best way to do it, and I can explain why. First of all, you can't account for every home occupation that someone might think of. So you never know what's going to come up. I mean, you got everything from car repair to candle making, right? I bumped into home occupations blowing glass. I actually came into contact in my old city with a garage full of propane tanks. And it was originally a complaint about a meth lab. And when we went inside, they had all blowing glass equipment. It was amazing. It was incredible. It was also incredibly dangerous because if that place caught fire, it would take out every house in the radius of it. So, but you never know what you're going to find, is my point. So what I did in the examples you have are the most common ones to get complaints. And they're typically the ones that generate noise and traffic. Operating an animal kennel, seen that. Car repair is completely inappropriate for a home occupation. Not only does it go into the realm of junk vehicles, but you've got leaking fluids going down the street in the storm drain. No one's going to convince me that that's an appropriate home occupation. So that's what I've done there is listed a few of what I believe should be considered completely off limits. And then on the flip side, I've listed a few that I think are patently obvious to be okay. The ideal home occupation is invisible. No signs, no noise, no traffic, nothing. You don't know it's there. And that is perfect for those professional grade, I guess, home occupations, the accountants, the lawyers, and so on. They have an office inside and they occasionally have visitors. And you would not know there's a business there. All you see is visitors coming to a house and leaving. So the best home occupation is invisible to everyone. And then what follows that is, of course, the regulations which catch anything else. So we've allowed these, we've not allowed these, and by the way, if you're doing any of this, that needs to stop. So that's what you have in front of you as an example. So what I would ask you to do, if you haven't already, is tell me if I'm on the right track, if there's anything the example I gave you is blatantly missing that you would like to see. This might be something that you have to take away with you and get back to me on later after some review, and I can understand that. But this is a big topic, and I will warn you that it's not always an easy one to address. What you're doing here is you're not only regulating people's behavior on their property, which is what code enforcement does every day, but you're treading into the realm of someone's livelihood. So you do have to tread carefully about regulations like this. So.
Discussion on this topic? Mr. Jackson?
So Leo, I think you're on the right track. I do believe that we need some clarity around this because given post-COVID environment, more and more people are working from home and finding new and creative ways to have incomes. All of that I think is great. However, there's one particular instance, or I would say behavior, that I don't really see prohibited on this list that I'm aware that is occurring.
Okay.
And that would be a residential home that is housing at least one family. And one part of the family has a landscaping business. The other part of the family has home construction, building, bricklaying kind of business. And on this particular property, there's often a box truck parked out front that's part of the business. And they use the backyard as a parking lot for the other vehicles and trailers and material and such, all of which is hidden by an 8 to 10 foot wooden privacy fence. So in order to get these trucks and trailers and material into the backyard, they often bump other fences in the alley and use adjacent driveways, private driveways, to get their large equipment into the backyard. They close the gate and then no one knows the better, right? So when you talk about controlling behaviors, you said the best sign of a home occupation is no sign of a home occupation. How do we accomplish that with that scenario?
Well, you've described a few things there that wouldn't even be in the realm of code enforcement. If you're doing, I mean, a home occupation or not, if you're bumping up vehicles against neighboring fences, that's a civil matter because you're probably going to damage your neighbor's fence, and now that's between the two of you. So unless code enforcement could see the fence and write up somebody for it being broken, that would be a civil matter between the two of them. If I understood your example correctly, it sounded like you were also describing someone using essentially their neighbor's driveway to kind of shimmy in, okay? That would be a civil matter / possibly trespassing.
Right.
So that is civil matter / police. So from a code enforcement standpoint, there's nothing we could do about that. The homeowner that's being damaged needs to assert their rights in the appropriate way. So specifically for that example that you're giving me, that would be my answer.
So trucks and trailers and materials stored in the backyard is okay?
Well, remember in code world, if we can't see it, it doesn't exist. So if we drive by, it's invisible to us. So yeah.
Does that really meet the definition of a home occupation? If they're a landscaper or a construction company, they're not doing that at a home. They run those businesses, yes, but they're doing the work elsewhere. I think most of these are talking about doing them right in the home. You're tutoring people, or you're baking cakes, or you're, giving art lessons or things like that. That's at the home. I think that's a different.
I think actually, Mr. Merritt, it would be covered, at least in the definition I've provided, because, if we run with Mr. Jackson's scenario, the owner of the landscaping business is living in that home, right? So they are running their business from that home. Sure, they're going out to other places and performing work, but their business is hubbed in this house, and this is where they're setting their schedules and they're managing employees and paying employees. You know what I mean?
In this scenario, we don't know that.
Yes, that's
They could be
true.
running to, another building to do that. What they're doing is they're storing their materials there.
They're storing materials
And
and
storing their
trucks and
trucks,
trailers
so.
that normally be stored on a lot. If you had a bona fide
understand.
business location, you would buy a location.
I think it's a
where you
narrow
could store.
definition here of, and I understand the scenario is problematic to those parties around it, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But I'm looking at this from a home occupation. I just see that a little bit differently. So,
They're working out of their home. They're storing all their equipment at the home. They're making appointments from the home. That's a home occupation to me. They're not taking customers at the home necessarily.
well, if
Or
you
seeing
don't
people
know,
potentially?
well, that's fine.
I'm just saying, is there a way to address that behavior? Because you brought up the word behavior, which resonated with me. In this, maybe this code's not the place, so maybe it's a different discussion. That's all I'm saying.
I would probably agree, just because of the out of public view factor we're dealing with. So code enforcement can't enforce what's not in public view at this time. So as soon as your scenario pushes things behind a fence, we've lost our authority now. So if you're leaving stuff out in the open, that's another story. In fact, we do, the outside storage ordinance says you can't store things outside. Well, that includes stuff on trailers and in the back of pickup trucks and stuff like that. So depending on what's happening, specifically, we could perhaps go at things another way. But once you hide something behind a fence, business things, a water barrel, whatever, in code world right now, it doesn't exist to us.
Understood.
Yeah.
I would add that any destruction of property is a criminal matter that can be handled by the police department as well.
Right.
As long as there's visible damage, it needs to be reported. And then the trespassing issue may be hard to catch, but if it's routine or there's cameras, then that's also a criminal as well as civil matter.
That's the next step.
We actually did have a complaint about that, and the complainant had a camera and caught the whole thing, and so we referred them to the police department. So cameras are so popular now, you can catch almost anything, so.
Certainly telling somebody it's a civil matter between your neighbor doesn't help resolve the issue, so maybe we can assist at least with the advice to document everything criminally.
Right.
Make sure everybody's safe, which is
Correct. Anything else, Richard? Anything else, Richard?
Nope, I'm good.
Mr. Driscoll?
As you said, I think at the beginning of this, I think this is a topic that we haven't discussed before. I think you said it's not regulated, don't have any codes for it. And so number one, I would just like more time to think about it. And also, again, we have two colleagues who are not here. And I think, when we do something, it's better if we do it all together rather than, well, let's do this, and then we want to go and revise it 2 weeks later or something like that. But on the issue of a home business, I'm not an attorney, but I think, again, it gets into an area where, are we overcomplicating your job? Because like with your example, Mr. Jackson, I know some very reputable, excellent plumbing companies and electrical companies as examples that have, say in Louisville, a facility where they have all their plumbing equipment, that's their warehouse, but they allow their electricians, their plumbers, their foundation guys, whatever, to drive the truck home. And it's usually a pickup, maybe it's a van, but it's not a big, commercial truck, because it leads to greater efficiency, saving costs. They carry a certain amount of stuff on their trucks, so they're not always going back, to Louisville and then, picking up something. And again, they cover the whole area, so, the whole metroplex. So
That's not my example, though, you understand?
I know, but,
Okay.
but someone brings what we think of as a commercial truck or a plumbing truck or electrical truck and parks it at their house. I'm just saying it gets into gray areas, and again, I said, I'm not an attorney, and I just think we need maybe to think through this some more. Yeah.
And just for the record, I wouldn't advocate for prohibiting that at all. Then you start bumping again into, you're preventing my ability to
Right,
maintain
right,
my livelihood.
right.
And so, unless they're running the business out of their home, if your boss says you can take a company car home, that is not a home occupation.
Right.
That's a perk of your job, and
But
congratulations.
as we know, there are a lot of folks that start a home business on their card table at home, and maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 years later, it grows such that, they've got 50 people, and then they've got a warehouse, they've got a place to park all their landscaping trucks and trailers and equipment and things, et cetera. So it just, I don't want to overcomplicate things for residents and for you guys' jobs. Yeah, so I think we need some more time on this, or I do.
Thank you, Mr. Driscoll.
I think you're on the right track. When I went door to door and was talking to neighbors and while I was running my campaign, I embarked on a lady who told me, and I think you interacted with her out on the west side, who mentioned that there were neighbors who had home occupations that were creating nuisances to the neighborhood with excessive vehicles, strange people coming at all hours in and out of the home. Nobody knew who they were, and there's a park right across the street from the home where the business was being run. So there was some concern that there were people that were unrecognizable to the community coming for a business. And so I think I don't think I was the one who brought this up, but I think over just conversation with the garage sales, we embarked on this one. So I think you're on the right track. I'm certainly supportive of putting in some regulations, and I think I too would like some time to make sure that we're covering all our bases. But I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the idea of having some additional time, and I think the idea, and we did it similarly with vehicles when we worked on the police department, of having some scenarios of understanding, I think that's really worth exploring going forward. And it'll address those concerns and, you know, the idea of parking, et cetera. So I think we're on the right track of having something. Agreed with, you know, most of the peers here that we're on the right track. Need a little more time. So
Okay.
thank you.
Sure. Page 1 and 3 in your document are just miscellaneous corrections. They're not regulatory related. These are typos and just kind of random things that we found, mainly the staff found, in working through the ordinance in its first year. So some of these might seem so minor that it's like, why bother? And that's exactly why we haven't talked about them until now. The only reason I would address them is because we're updating the law anyway, so why not fix them? But other than that, some of them, again, are so minor, it's like, we can just wait until the next update. Well, that's now, so that's why they're here. So that's on page 1 and 3. The other suggestion, I believe this is the last one I made, was the bring your own booze or beer regulations. This got put in place actually not too long after I arrived. And we were discussing this in community services and neighborhood services, and when I went to research it for this topic, I couldn't find it. And then I realized with planning's help, Ms. Sharupa Zen, who's awesome, I believe it was Sharupa or Danielle, they're both awesome, it's under chapter 46, which is miscellaneous. And that was weird to me. I think when most of us think of BYOB, we think of businesses. I think of restaurants that let you bring in your own alcohol and things like that. But it was hiding under 46, and I couldn't find it without help. And so I bring it up again that if I can't find it, and I work in codes all day, is it really world-class service to expect a resident to find it or a business owner to find it if they want it? So at this time, I'm not suggesting we change it at all. I'm just suggesting we move it into 26 under businesses where I believe it's easier to find. So nothing really substantial there.
Discussion.
And that's all I have for you.
Any further discussion with Mr. Bonanno?
None for me. I'm supportive of your last
I think
recommendation.
we covered everything.
All right, thank you, Leo.
Thank you.
All right, that moves us then to agenda item A4 to discuss converting residential addresses in the 75244 zip code to the 75234 zip code.
Good afternoon. I'm James McDonald, intern with the city manager's office. This was actually brought up by an idea from Councilman Jackson that some of the residents are looking at combining the city, making it all one zip code. 75234 is the most commonly known zip code in the city, but 75244 incorporates the east side of the city. This all came about, I asked, can we do this? Is it possible? The short answer is yes, it is possible. Fresco did it with a section of their city that carried the Little Elm, so they moved all that. USPS approved it and they got it moved. So is it possible? Yes. Is it easy? No. But we'll work through that and I'll explain that and come back to that. This is Farmers Branch. These are the zip codes. Farmers Branch actually has 6 different zip codes within the city. We think there's 1, now we think there's 2, but there's actually 6. Some of them are small areas, some are large areas, some are residential, some are commercial. So can we change this where it's just residential changes? Or do we need to change the whole area to one consolidated zip code? How will this actually affect the residents of Farmers Branch? It'll unify the city. Everybody has the same zip code. They'll know it. It'll make it simple for more transactions. The cons, everybody's going to have to change in those areas. If you live in 75244, you're going to have to change all your personal records, banking, retirements, any checks, anything, your mail, driver's license, to reflect the new zip code, or you're going to have trouble getting your mail. The post office said they can do it, but they are not in favor of doing only residential for an area. Because if you have a business across the street, residents across from it, and you change those, now the post offices are trying to figure out where the mail actually goes to now. Okay. So the commercial businesses have spoken up. You know, I want to thank Allison for the work on this from economic development there. She got hold of the businesses, asked them what their input was, and they said, can you do it residential only? Well, I've explained to you the problem with the post office changing it, and they're against it. Really, kind of paraphrasing the email that was sent in, I hope the city's ready to go against the fight, because we have to change all of our international and national branding just for a zip code change. Is it worth it to the city? So this is, what we're actually discussing today, though, was the 75244 to the 75234. Okay, so that was brought up. So my question to y'all is, what direction do you want? Do you want to proceed forward with changing just this zip code, changing all zip codes? How do you want me to proceed forward with this? Or drop it? That's up to you. I'm doing what y'all want me to do.
Richard, since you brought this up, why don't you start off?
Okay, be happy to. Thank you, Mr. Merritt. So this wasn't my idea. To be clear, this is just how things work. Residents are passionate about things, and as their city council member, I bring those forward for the council to consider. A topic like this, I wouldn't consider moving forward on any action until we got broader resident input, as well as understanding more about the costs and the process, right? The impact of this to our city and to the businesses and such. Since this hit the agenda last week, I've gotten a number of emails. Most folks are opposed to the change. Some are in favor. Others with ideas of, well, while we've got the hood up, let's look at changing it, all of Farmers Branch to 75234. So all of a sudden, this thing just got a little bit bigger than what I anticipated. But what I'd like to do, at least tonight, and especially in the interest of time, is, the idea was brought forward by a resident in my district, Jonathan Smith, who is here tonight. So thank you, Jonathan, for being here. He's provided an impact statement. Each council member should have one. I'd just like to read it aloud, right? So keep in mind, obviously, I am neutral on this until we have more information, but this is a Farmers Branch resident's impact statement. Dear Farmers Branch City Council, I moved to Clubway Lane in December 2010 in the 75244 zip code, not anticipating the problems I would have with the zip code shared with other cities. Some of the confusion was almost comical, but much of it was frustrating, such as when the former Walmart location tried to charge me a nickel per bag for my purchases. I soon found out the confusion could become dangerous. After paying every month for alarm monitoring and the annual monitoring license fee to the city, my alarm went off while I was away. The alarm company notified me, and I advised them to please have the police see if any doors or windows appeared to be opened. I later called the alarm company back and was told, we called the city, and they said you didn't pay the fee and weren't going to drive out there, so we closed this out. You can imagine how shocked I was. After several frantic and angry calls to the alarm company and the city of Farmers Branch, which verified I had paid the monitoring license fee, I finally discovered the problem, my zip code. The monitoring service company, separate from the alarm company, typed in my zip code and called the city of Dallas, which is the default city for 75244. I have since rectified the information with all of the relevant parties. However, I cannot help but wonder how many other cities within Farmers Branch are in danger and unaware of such, because their emergency response services will follow the same steps and simply refer to their zip code when notifying local emergency services. Will it take dead citizens or homes burned beyond restoration before anyone takes this matter seriously? When this topic comes up to most longtime Farmers Branch citizens, they usually laugh and say, "We're just used to it," or "It takes an act of Congress to change it." This reaction is quite naive. I'm not used to being told help is not coming because of my address. Past experiences have taught me that it does not take an act of Congress to change a zip code, such as when I lived in nearby Hillcrest and Beltline. My sister recently had her zip code changed in McKinney. Growing up in Quinlan, Texas, our address was changed more than once. This year, residents in Frisco complained they shared a zip code with Little Elm and got theirs changed, so it can be done. I would request that either the 75244 section within Farmers Branch be assigned a new zip code that is solely dedicated to Farmers Branch, or that the section of 75244 that is within the boundaries of the city of Dallas and Addison be reassigned. Regardless of which approach is undertaken, this should be a priority for the council as it involves the safety and well-being of constituents. Jonathan Smith, 3917 Clubway Lane, Farmers Branch, Texas, 75244. So thank you for that, Jonathan. That's one resident's concerns and experiences. As I said, I've received other email, and there's no action marked for tonight. It's just discussion, but if we continue to discuss this and we want to go down this path, I would like to at least wait until we have more input from residents, and perhaps we do that in a town hall that I'm scheduling for the middle of November.
Anything else to add?
That's it.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes. Yeah, I've heard residents kind of humorously talk about this from time to time, and but as you said, this is relatively new on our agenda. I have not also had the opportunity to speak with citizens about this, and I think we need to explore it, fully as a council and get input from citizens and also our businesses, because I have lived in places before where zip codes have changed, and I know that it's been an expense. It can be a considerable expense for businesses. And I think it would be very difficult to do it for residents and not for businesses and vice versa. So I think we need some time to work through all these things.
Mr. Rowan?
Yeah, I think I need some more time and resident input as well. I think if there's a great enough need, then I think it may warrant, regardless of the time and expense that it may take to undertake that project. I think if we get enough resident support from it, then I think it might be something we need to move forward with. I just need more information.
Yeah, and from my own perspective, I had an opportunity to talk to a couple of residents that live in the 75244. And I think we're talking about operationally, there's a big question, and we've touched on it here. This is really asking the United Postal System to make a change. And so we can simply request that simply, but the mechanics, as we've talked about, are tremendously big. Not only just notifying your alarm companies, et cetera, but if we do, and it does look like, I read up on the Inspector General of the U.S. Post Office, that they need efficiency as the purpose for this. And I'm not sure at this moment that there's an efficiency problem with 75244. It's been established for, who knows how many years. We haven't explored how long it's been 75244. So I think there's some real challenges here. Doesn't mean that it can't occur, we understand that. But I think in some of those cases, and I did look up the Little Elm expansion from Frisco, that's a unique situation. It's in their far northwest corner. It's brand-new construction. We're talking about an existing, community that's already had that for a long time. I think we need to hear more from the residents if they're even interested in this before I would explore that. And I do have a portion of District 5 is in 75244, so it's impactful. And I know your almost entirety of your district covers that.
Right.
So, and it's highly business-centric, commercial as well, so you have to consider that ramification in the long run.
So I don't want to put our staff to any more, I don't want to expend more resources necessarily, right? I do think understanding the costs perhaps, or if there's cost to the city in doing this, other than our time, might be important, but as I said, I'm planning a town hall November 17th. That might be a good place, since the vast majority of the impact is District 4, to get some resident input there. And then, so table this until,
I think you'd also have to look at what are the expectations for the United States Postal Service, and what does that entail? I mean, if you need, 50% of the addresses need to approve this, who's gonna collect that survey? I mean, are we buying onto that? I don't think that's necessary. I'm just gonna say that.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to also understand maybe what are some of the issues that people are experiencing, like we've heard one, I want to hear if there are any more. I guess I haven't really looked into this because I didn't even know it was possible to do something like that, but like I said, I think I want some more information before we make a decision.
Another angle to this would be, is the wish or desire of some folks to make 75234 exclusive to Farmers Branch, because there's parts of Dallas that has the zip code 75234. So if that was the case, then that's going to have ripple effects for other people, that they're going to get a new zip code and have all the same issues or hassles of changing things for residents and businesses.
Mr. Driscoll, if I may, on that point there, the post office did say that if the 75234 portion of Dallas wanted to change, Dallas would have to request that. They would have to do all their GIS to give it to the post office to change that. We can't change that to make it exclusive to Farmers Branch, if that answers that.
Okay, thanks.
thank you very much.
So what I'm hearing then is to kind of put this on hold till I get feedback from y'all to move forward or not?
Correct. I believe that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Moves us to agenda item A5, discuss criteria for the neighborhood partnership programs, including the Dallas County Housing Program.
Okay, so tonight I have two completely separate things I'm going to talk to you about. I'm going to start with the Neighborhood Partnership Program and how it can be a repair program that we have discussed, totally different than the Dallas County program. So we were requested to research a potential housing repair program, not including the senior repair program that Metro Crest Service currently does. I see Metro Crest Services here tonight. So again, they do a senior program for them, and we're requesting, staff was requested a research for non-seniors, so residents. Our population is below 50,000, so that means that we are disqualified for community development block grant funding. So that kind of changes how other cities get to do stuff, and you hear them doing things, and we don't get all the money for those grants. We had a repair program prior to 2010, and it was discontinued. John Land can comment on that. I started in 2011, so I can't tell you much about it. The city of Carrollton has 4 home repair programs, and they use a combination of general fund and then the community development block grant funding. So they get significant funding from the federal government, and that's how they allocate it. They have 3 staff members dedicated to the programs, for the repair programs. Plus, they have a demo rebuild, but which is only in their neighborhood empowerment zone, which is a low-income area. So that's how they staff it. And, but currently Metro Crest Services provides a senior repair program if your income is below 80% of area median income. So we can talk about that in a minute. I want to talk about the steps of the Carrollton Repair Program because it would be similar if we were to do one here. You know, they're a neighboring community, although they have a higher population. Let's talk about it. So the first thing is Metro Crest Services does income verification, meaning if a resident comes forward, they provide that service to the city of Carrollton, and they make sure that they are below the 80% AMI. Bank statements and all sorts of stuff. So it's staff time to do that, and they do that piece of the pie. Everything else falls with the 3 staff members with the city of Carrollton. And so I did a few of the steps here just so that we understand what the program involves at the city level. They receive an application after verification. They provide, a staff member goes out to do a home inspection to determine, is there a need for a repair here? They meet several contractors on site to get quotes, and they have a lot of verifications they need to do, make sure you're a resident, that you own the home outright, and things of that nature. They select the contractor, and they get into a contract with the vendor. They also get into a contract with the resident. There are some liability issues that they take care of with waivers and things of that nature. But it is a grant, and there's a compliance period, and the city must monitor the program in the compliance period. So, to break down a lot of information, they have 4 programs that I thought we might want to look at tonight. They have a minor repair program that's citywide. They have a minor repair program in neighborhood empowerment zones only. They have an emergency repair program, and they have a thing called People Helping People. And as you can see, the grant amount varies for each one. It's an application process, income verification. See Tracy back there, they do all the work for the verification of income, and then they hand it back to the city. And whichever grant that you apply for in these buckets, the eligible repairs are as such. It goes anything from general minor repairs on the exterior to your house to interior emergency plumbing and electrical. It said not tree removal, so I thought that would be also kind of funny since we do talk about tree removal here and there. Replacement of air conditioning and heating units is one for the emergency repair program and interior. And then the People Helping People is interesting because if you have a code violation, they kind of help you if you're low income to serve it up. So if you're a well-capitalized individual, you can't get the grant. So it goes through who is an applicant. Certainly it's a resident, certain income. You have to be current on your taxes. You have to be current. You can't have liens on your property and things of that nature, the typical things you would consider. The funding sources are a collection between general fund and the community development block grant that the city of Farmers Branch does not get because of our population. So that's why we kind of get left out of programs that you might hear around other cities. We just function differently. In the compliance program, as you can see, there's a 3-year lien all the way to a 7-year lien, depending upon how much money you get from the city. So I thought I would show the maximum income levels. So 80% of area median income, the family size, 1 person, it could be 2 adults, it could be 1 person with a child as the number 2, it could be 1 person with 2 kids as a family size of 3. But either way, you can't make over a certain amount so that we truly are serving a low-income population that truly needs a repair of some sort. So that's the table I have before you. And I just want to open it up. I know we had neighborhood partnership program in the budget for this coming year. We don't really have a structure around a repair program, and I know we talked about other things in neighborhood partnership program. So if we want to discuss how we would do it, how much funding of the $75,000 is for the repair program, I can start maybe crafting something specific. The reality of the situation is I have a very small apartment. So I don't know how we would administer it, but we would have to look at that too of using contract help and whatnot to help us with this situation for this fiscal year. So I know, Councilmember Roman, you were
Yes.
interested in this item.
Thank you for doing the research
You're welcome.
and putting this together.
Welcome.
My first question is, it was news to me that we had a somewhat of a similar program in the past and it was discontinued, so I'd like to understand why.
So I came back to the city in 2009 and it was sunsetted. At the time, it was ran by an assistant to the city manager, which that position no longer exists. And my understanding was it was a combination of people just weren't aware of it, weren't being used. We were going through a downturn in the economy. That was 2009. And so we were kind of coming out of a housing bubble, and that position was eliminated and the funds were eliminated for it. So I never saw it in existence. Now, we did resurrect demo rebuild. We did that in a manner where it was a rebate of taxes, so we were able to do that without it impacting the budget. But I think we formed that in 2010. But that program never came back.
Yeah. It sounds like we're in a different environment now that we have funds available for that, and we're certainly in a different time. So can you also help me understand, there was a term that was used, neighborhood empowerment zones.
Yes. So Carrollton designates areas. We may use the word target area.
Okay.
And so I spoke with Carrollton last week. It's not a great science, but they have a polygon around improvement values of homes that are under a certain amount. So they make sure that the resources are going to the most needed areas.
Yeah.
And that's how they do that.
Okay. Yeah, I think when I was thinking about this, I said, okay, well, what's the target audience for this? And I certainly want to make sure we're helping those people that don't have any other way to help themselves. I just want to make sure that we're not saying it's only this little speck in Farmers Branch that qualifies for that area. I don't think that it will be, but I just want to do our homework and make sure that we understand if we're selecting a target area and we're saying it's similar to neighborhood empowerment zones like Carrollton has, that we're not siloing a large population. So I'd like to understand where that would be in our city. I really liked kind of the array, kind of like a menu, like a buffet of different programs that we can kind of choose from that someone's already created. I liked the fact that they had $7,500 as kind of the maximum amount that they would grant somebody. Because I guess I was, without considering that there were other expenses, I was thinking to myself, well, $7,500 for $75,000, that'd be 10 people that we could help. And I suppose it would be reduced later, but I was thinking that might be a good amount to shoot for. And I was thinking of it being, since it was going to be something that was accessible to people who are not seniors, that ideally people who are not seniors would have the ability to work and to contribute something. And so I just want to make people feel like they're invested, like not like it's just a free handout where they're like, oh, look, I got a new this, and maybe they're not as careful with it because they weren't really invested in replacing or repairing that. So I want people to feel like they have skin in the game, and that's just my take on it. So I was hoping it would be like a matching program, and I know like other cities have a matching program where it's like, okay, well, if the expense of this is $6,000, we'll cover 3. You cover the other 3, and then we'll be good. And I think that helps stretch out the money a little bit further. I really liked the eligibility of repairs. I think to make it as expansive as possible and applicable to more instances, I liked combining maybe all of these things that are listed in here in the little second row. Let's see.
So you're saying the minor repair program that's citywide for Carrollton, you're saying general minor
Yeah, so
repairs,
I-
including all of,
So I kind of wrote a little list as I was going through, and it seemed like a very comprehensive list of nearly everything. So I put, general minor repairs, exterior house painting, roof repair, accessibility problems, so like handicap accessible types of repairs, interior emergency plumbing, so anything, I wouldn't be in support of something that would be improving the interior of somebody's home unless it were a health and safety hazard, like their plumbing was needed to be repaired, or their AC unit was out and it was, scorching hot outside, or something that posed a health and safety risk. Yeah, those were kind of the notes that I put together, and I also wanted to make sure that in our program, that it reflected something similar to what we have in compliance under the first row under minor repair program. So people aren't just like, well, I'm going to use this money. It's a 50% discount to repair something, then I'll turn around, sell it, make a profit. I want to make sure that people are going to stay in our community and will be able to experience being a Farmers Branch resident and being able to have some help in repairing something essential to their home.
True. So that would be on the city to monitor, has that house sold? Has anything gone on? Is there a for sale by owner sign in front of the house? So from our perspective, I have to make sure that we all understand this is an enormous amount of hours. And so I don't know who's going to do it. I don't have a clear solution for that right now, but I can tell you how it works in other places.
Sure.
I can't tell you how it's going to work here, just because we all are pretty lean. But this is how it's been functioning, and these are the mechanisms for the funding of it and the compliance. The compliance period would need to be taken into consideration, because if we fix up someone's house and they sell it, I think we'd be pretty angry if I missed that compliance period. I want to go back to the steps, and we can discuss, we can start to research how it would function. I don't have a good answer for you tonight. These are a few of the steps. There's probably 15 that I didn't mention, because there's just a lot. Carrollton has 3 full-time staff for the program. So they said one of the full-time staff runs the minor repair program, full-time. So it's just something to consider, as if we want to do it, and we want to do it with the right way to do it, where you go in and you verify ownership and you do the income verification and you set it all up, we have to go and meet at least 3 contractors at the site and have an inspector.
And do you know how much funding each of these different programs receives?
I did write that down. I'm sorry to include it. I know they have several $100,000.
Okay.
They have hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, because I'm thinking maybe
They have a lot of money.
This is a small amount, and
Yeah.
minus the expenses that we might incur.
Yep.
I don't know how many people we might be able to help, but I'm assuming it's significantly less given the amount of money that they put into these programs.
They do about 20 a year. So it's something to consider. They do, yeah,
Allison, did you say 20 a year?
20 a year, because they're each one is very time consuming. I spoke to the lady that runs the division. She said each one is very time consuming, and we do an average of 20 a year amongst
Sure.
the 3 staff.
They do 20 in total, or
Total.
20 for the minor repair?
20 total,
Okay.
because each one is a lot of steps. So
Right, I
it's
understand, but
it's a
they're just
program.
a much larger city than we are.
I
so
know.
just
They have
wanted-
133,000, and we're almost at 50. I feel like we're at 50, but,
We feel that way too.
Okay, thank you.
I feel that way.
I feel like we missed some multifamily people, but the census says we're under 50.
Anything else?
So do you want me to come back in 2 weeks with a little more buttoned-up situation? The good news is we know how other people do it. The bad news is I don't really know how we would do it. So do we want to talk amongst
Yeah,
our,
one thought we had, so, Allison's done a great job with demo rebuild, and we have that neighborhood partnership program, and she did a great job with that. So we started with Allison. The other thing she's great at is getting other people to do her work. And
No doubt about
we
it.
started with Allison.
That's where I'm going with this.
So as we've I've had conversations with Tracy about this and really trying to understand how complicated this is and how you have to be right about so many little things, because you're getting bids on somebody's house and you're picking a vendor that's going to go and do work, and we're somewhat liable for it. We wanted to make sure we were really careful for it. So I think our recommendation, while we have an intern, is have our intern really craft this program and kind of own that and build something that we can kind of see and understand how it functions and then find its home while we do that. Because I'm convinced after talking to Tracy and talking with Allison that we need them selling things. We need that group focused on growing the economy, and I think this needs to live somewhere other than economic development. We just started there because it was kind of a natural growth of the neighborhood partnership program. We already had the alarm went off, we're delegated an assignment.
I don't think he wants to do it.
So anyway, I think that's gonna be our path to start with, is we'll start with, James is is the city manager's office, we'll have some oversight on that and just have him bring back some thoughts. Sorry I set your alarm off.
Don't let it work. Chris, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, just one comment. As you discussed and illustrated very well, Allison, that this is a program I think we need, and there are a lot of steps involved, and obviously you've got to approve the people, they've got to be qualified, et cetera, and meet certain hurdles. And I think there would need to be some type of language, which I would guess Carrollton has in their program, you know, that people can't then flip their house and sell it, that there's some clawback, you know, language in the contracts. But I think one thing we need to really think about is the administration. And again, just thinking about MetroCrest services, I mean, we've used them for different things, and also for the kind of the pilot program that we approved at the budget retreat 2 years ago, to do, I think, start with the $50,000 program, you know, that was for seniors, but maybe to have some discussions with Tracy and MetroCrest, if maybe that would be a cost-effective way for us to do that, rather than in whichever department we'd silo this, you know, have to add staff.
Okay, we can have a discussion with MetroCrest and see their temperature on it.
Anything else, Mike? Richard?
The only thing I would say is I agree with Councilman Driscoll about the admin. Carrollton's got hundreds of thousands of dollars and 3 full-time staff to administer a program that benefits 20 people a year.
Yeah.
In my financial mind, that's a bit out of balance, I guess is a term I choose to use. Albeit, I appreciate the need and, you know, our city's allocating funds to this. And so I really think that's where we need to spend the time, is understand what's going to be on us and what's that going to cost us, because
Okay.
we don't want to have a $75,000 bucket of money to give away and we're spending more than that, figuring out how to give it away.
Right, okay. I'll do more research and I'll come back to y'all. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Sounds good.
Okay. That's my good news, bad news. Now I have good news. Okay. Dallas County Housing Replacement Program. Okay, let me stop for a second. We do have right now a program in our target area with Builders of Hope. So the city owns 15 lots, just for a quick recap. And those lots that are already cleared, there aren't a home on, there's not a home on the lot. We're gonna build a home, and individuals under 120 or immediate income can purchase the home. That's a program, that's not what we're talking about tonight, but Builders of Hope is a builder of workforce development and low-income housing, and I invited them here tonight because the county wants to give us money to build more houses, and we're already building with them, and they are in this space and they can explain it better than I can. Also, for 2 years, I've been talking about James Armstrong, like the Wizard of Oz. Is he real? Is he really behind this curtain? And so, he's real. He's here tonight. James, if you'll stand up, that's James with Builders of Hope. That's our partner. So, he's real. And I'm going to get into this, and they may answer some questions, and then I may answer some. But I think this started, didn't you pitch it to the county?
Yes.
Okay, so this is his fault, but it's good news. They want to give us $5 million in ARPA funding. It's kind of the punchline. They have a minimum of, for housing replacement program for 20 houses below AMI of 80% for 20 houses. So what this means is you have to have your house paid off. And the county will pay. They already do this in other parts of the county, by the way, they just have never done it in Farmers Branch. They will pay to scrape your house. They won't pay to relocate you for rent somewhere else, but they'll pay to scrape your house and build you a new house. It will be a small house, because we know how Dallas County Appraisal District drives by and they assess the value of your home by how big it is usually, right? So the larger your home, the more property tax you're gonna pay. So they already have a whole replacement program, and they build between 1,300 and 1,600 square foot homes right now going on all over Dallas County. So the Dallas County Housing Replacement Program, new homes under 1,600 square feet, and that's deliberate, so that they're not, the people that go into the house are not priced out of their property tax that we don't control. We don't set DCAD values. I know people sometimes think my office does. I get calls. I don't. So don't call. Replacing homes that are beyond repair. And that's another good point. Somebody has to go in and qualify, is it beyond repair? And the homeowner, though, must have a fully paid mortgage, income verification. Maybe MetroCrest Services can help us with this. And Dallas County liked that we had a target area, that we were kind of focused on one pocket, so they were making a difference in an area. So they like the idea of the target area. Funding is directly from them, not from city. It's from ARPA funds that they're getting, and so they're wanting to pass it on to us. There is a compliance period of 15 years. So if you sell at year 5, you've got 10 more years that you're going to pay back. When you go to title, when you go to closing, title will find it because it's got to be, it's on your property. So when you go to sell your property and you think, oh, no one will know, I got this brand new house, they'll absolutely know because it will come out in the title search. So you'll owe that whether you want to or not, and that will get paid back to the county because it's county money, not city money. Who will administer the program? Well, I guess we will. I don't really know, but city staff with MetroCrest Services doing income verification. MetroCrest does income verification, and we are allowed to take a percentage of ARPA funds to help us administer the program. So we have a contractor in our office that's helping us with the Builders of Hope program right now. And Builders of Hope would be the natural layup of who's building it, because they're already building in a kind of a sweet spot for building and cost materials in the same trade area. So your general conditions and whatnot is kind of controlled. So Builders of Hope, sitting right here. Why are the homes under 1,600 square feet? Great question. I just have to put DCAD sets the value on square footages. Low-income people cannot afford expensive property tax bills. So if I build you a 2-story house because you have all your extended family in there, you're not going to be able to pay a property tax bill. Again, city doesn't set that. Why is the county giving us $5 million for a housing program? James, I guess, is the reason. And so after years of discussions, we've been talking to them about participating in the TIF, the I-35 TIF. So to be fair, we do know them from TIF discussions. They're very aware we're doing a Builders of Hope program already in the target area. They like the idea. And then James pitched it to him. And do we have to accept the funds? No, we don't have to do anything. But the county just kind of wanted our feedback. We would get into an interlocal agreement with the county with the specifics of what we would do with the $5 million. But I can tell you they want a minimum of 20 homes. And it has to be below 80% of area median income. It's similar to the space of our 15 homes. But our 15 homes are actually between 80 and 120% AMI. So we have a workforce development program going on right now for the city-owned 15 lots, a little bit higher income. And then the Dallas County program with their 20 homes is a little bit lower income, but it's a brand new house for somebody. So can you imagine if you're in a home that you've owned for a long time and you really can't afford all the foundation and other things of that nature, this could be a fit, but you have to qualify. So Farmers Branch just hasn't participated in the program in the past. The gentleman said he just wasn't aware of the need. And then he met James. So we can thank James or not, depending on how you feel about it. But I wanted you to meet him, and he can explain AMI tables and things like that that are rather new to me. And they build all over Dallas County.
Very good,
Good news for now.
very good. Questions? Go ahead, Rob.
So with this program, the 20 homes that it would essentially tear down and rebuild, it's different from the Renaissance program where with the Renaissance program, people would have to essentially sell their home and then purchase the new one, right?
So, just for anybody watching, and so I know it sounds confusing, the Renaissance program are lots that are cleared off. So there's no home to be sold. The Renaissance program with the builders of home 15 lots that one day will be for sale one day, they'll be buying a new product, but it's a little bit larger product, so it's a little more expensive product. It probably goes up to what, $350 or something?
$350.
These houses with Dallas County aren't for sale. It's someone's personal property, and it's a home beyond repair, and it's a low-income individual, so it's not a for sale. There's not gonna be a buyer and a seller here.
So there's no mortgage associated for the person.
And there's no mortgage associated because it's paid off. But there is a contract with the city and the owner, similar to Dimmer Rebuild, and there's a contract with the city and Builders of Hope, similar to our one we have now.
Okay.
So it's different but similar.
Yeah.
And then we have a neighborhood renaissance program that you mentioned where we buy dilapidated homes. We still do that here and there. The barrier to entry in this area has gotten higher for me, and that's our hurdle. So
Okay.
it's a lot of moving parts.
Do you know what the effect on neighboring properties are if one of these 20 homes were to be torn down and rebuilt in terms of property values?
Do I know the effect, like what's gonna happen to the property
Yeah.
value?
Does it typically?
Really, I can't say.
Okay.
What I would say though, is that the values either way should be consistent with the home. So if you have new home stock and it's one story, so all this will be one story product. And we're doing our first program with James, I told him I have to do one story product, otherwise you push people out of a neighborhood because it gets too expensive.
Yeah.
And so we're trying our very best.
Mhm.
I don't know where it's ever done well. I talked to the county about it. I've talked to James about it. How do you not get values too high? And how do you redevelop good properties? It's almost impossible. I feel like unless you have a defined square footage. So think of cottages. And the appraisal district drives by and I point to Braden because they represent them too. And they drive by and they're gonna assess that value for that brand new home. And it's gotta be reasonable, but we don't control that.
Yeah.
So that's a tough one, but the neighboring properties that are not redeveloped, they probably stay at the same value because they would look at it in individual basis.
Okay.
Because if a brand new large two-story amazing house went up, they would have to put in better value on the improvement value, not the land value.
Right.
So the land values stay the same for the whole street typically because they're all 60 by 120s or 70 by 130s. So when they go by the street, Braden, tell me if I'm wrong, they're just gonna put the land value the same if all the lots are typically the same. Improvement values change.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping the improvement value of your neighbor that hadn't done anything, he might be ashamed to mow his lawn and put a potted plant outside, the broken window theory. That might be the only change.
Okay, understood. Thank you so much for your contribution and your help to the city. We appreciate your partnership, and I'm satisfied with all of my answers, my questions.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Disher?
Yes, I like the program as it's been outlined, and I'd like to thank you, and also you, James, for bringing this to us. One thing I like the most about this, it really fills a niche, you could say nationwide in housing, but certainly also here. We have a nationwide shortage of starter homes and smaller homes, and that's going on everywhere where larger and larger, more expensive homes are built, which drives up everyone's property values and
Correct.
property taxes. But there are generations of people here in Farmers Branch that have raised families in 3-bedroom homes that are from 1,000 to 1,300, 1,400, 1,500 square feet. And, we also, one of our goals in some of the other housing initiatives we had was to keep people living here that want to stay here. And so some of these folks might be empty nesters or whatever. Regardless, this is a program that would fill that niche that they can stay here. And we certainly have housing that would fit the criteria that, needs to be replaced. It's quite old.
So that's a good point. I may have missed it. The county program is different than ours. It's almost better because it keeps residents in the neighborhood.
Right.
So our program, we bought
Right.
houses that like the roof was falling in and you just wouldn't believe what's going on. And it was the right thing to do. But of course, the person couldn't stay because the house couldn't stay. So this way, residents can stay on their property and get a paid-off house. So they don't owe anything to the county back.
Yeah, and folks that are retired and on completely a fixed income, or whatever their circumstances, they're not going to be gentrified out of the community.
Correct.
And that's a concern that, I've heard from people
no
over the
doubt.
years.
No doubt.
So I think this, as outlined, is a very reasonable, very sensible program that would fit some of our needs, for sure.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Driscoll?
No.
Mr. Jackson?
So maybe I missed it. What is the target area?
Okay. North of Valley View, west of Josie, south of Valwood, east of B Street is an unofficial target area that we've had for this inventory of the 15 lots for Builders of Hope. And so it's kind of an unofficial zone that we came up with maybe about 2 years ago, that council came up with, for us not to sell outside of that area. And it was probably more than that, it was probably 5 years ago, because I sold one house on Hartside, and a two-story product went up for $500,000, and that's when I realized I'm not selling one more lot over there. I'm gonna be a problem with it. So I stopped selling lots at that point in that area, and I just held on to them, and I picked more up, and I held on to them because I had to think through what's the best route moving forward to not make values too high and put product back that's sustainable and not expensive. And it's not an easy, quick answer, so it took time for research, and that's how I met Builders of Hope. And I see Crystal in the back. A lot of people here have been touching this project for years, so I can't take credit for it, although I'll take it. But anyway.
Take partial.
I'll take part of it. Yeah, so that's where it started when I saw that house go up for sale, and I thought, uh-oh, that's gonna be a problem. And so we can control only what we can control. We can only control the 15 lots that we owned. So that's how we came up with a one-story cottage program for income that's more workforce development.
Yep. I like the idea this keeps residents in their
Yeah,
home.
it's better.
Right? Keeps, I think there probably are seniors, or
Could be.
near seniors that will
Yep.
want to take advantage of this if they can qualify. So thank you, James, for your partnership. I know that's been mutually beneficial and good for our community over the last number of years. So that's all the questions I have.
Demo rebuild is for citywide, by the way, so residents in target area can apply for demo rebuild, just another footnote.
Sure.
But if a resident did the county program, they would have to meet the county, it would be a smaller home than what they're in, or it might be the same size home than what they're in. But either way, you can't really knock a free home.
Right. And these wouldn't be 1,600 square foot homes that you built in a neighborhood full of 2,200 square foot homes.
True, the lots, they're appropriate with the lot.
They're, right,
They're
All
appropriate
those
with the
lots
lot.
are really, really small.
right,
Yeah.
right.
They are, although our 15 lots, we're calling, we haven't really rolled it out very well yet because we're not ready, but we're calling it the porches because I want to do a deep front porch, covered deep front porch. And I feel like design doesn't need to be expensive, it just needs to be thoughtful. And so in an area where you have lots right next to each other, it's kind of nice to see your neighbor, and it's kind of nice to sit on a porch. So our design.
Builds community and.
And it builds community wherever you live. I have a front porch and it's the size of this podium and it's not functional. So that's what I told James, if I have control over the design, that's why it's taken a little bit longer, then we'll be happy. And so I think it's an interesting partnership. I don't think he's, had someone redesign all of his stuff before, but I have, and that's why we're not ready yet, because we're still dealing with the size of the porches, because it's all front entry, and to get a wide porch, it doesn't really fit on the lot right now. So, might have to have another zoning amendment, but we'll get the porch, right, Sharika? Yeah, it's a yes.
So Allison, thank you. Anything else, Richard?
I'm done.
Allison, thank you. I think part of this, and James, thank you and your team for being here tonight and the partnership that we have. We look forward to continue working with you. I think this goes back to what Omar said earlier. I think we're going to end up with our own little chart, if you will, of the offerings that we're able to provide. So that's an exciting metamorphosis, if you will, of, we didn't have anything, or maybe we had something in the past, we had a little bit something.
Yeah.
We have our partnership with Tracy Eubanks here at MetroCrest. Here's what we can offer, and I think that's the partnerships that we can benefit from.
Right.
I like the idea of this program allowing individuals to stay in their home. We'll need to explain, if you will, that idea, okay, Grandma and Grandpa, you're gonna move for 9 months, 12 months,
4.
less,
what
whatever
you
the
told me.
target. What is the target? It's
How
a
quick
short-
can you build
We
it?
hope it's a short term, right? And the shorter.
A lot of
the term-
variables.
A lot of variables, understandable in this
5.
marketplace that we're in, but to have them reposition themselves so this, but on the backside is
Right.
where the benefit really swings to having all of that new, long-term, paid-off benefit, and that's where the win is.
I agree, I agree.
For everyone, the neighbors included, as
agree.
there will be that opportunity. So look forward to those challenges, as small as they are, that are ahead. And then operationally, we do have to worry about how we
Yep.
function all of this.
So I'll come back with the ILA details. So that will be my next step to you guys, is what does interlocal agreement details look like? And then what is the agreement with the county?
Okay.
But James mentioned, and I talked to him today, that he thinks y'all will win awards for this, so we will see.
Of course.
It's my goal. I don't know what the awards are or where they're from, but
That'll
I'm
be the
open to
icing on
it.
the cake.
The icing on the cake. And you think about, we have 15 lots, there's 20, I mean, that's a lot of new homes in a little pocket,
Correct.
but
We're excited. I'm excited. Thank you. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Anything else?
Thank
We
you,
have
James.
one more item for ourselves here, and that's future agenda items. Just go around. Richard.
Nothing new?
Nope.
Yes.
Okay.
So, I always try and find ways that we can improve and make something bigger and better. And I think I found an opportunity for us to do that. I really enjoyed the Viva Farmers Branch this year. And I was thinking to myself, I said, how can we make this bigger and better and more inclusive and reflective of the entire population in Farmers Branch? And I said, why don't we take this to the next level and make it a multicultural event? And so I just wanted to kind of see if we can discuss it at some point and see what that would look like.
Anything else? I don't have anything at the moment.
We do have an executive
We
session.
do have an executive session, so we'll close the study session and we will move into an executive session. And I'll do my part here. This is item B1. Council may convene into closed executive session pursuant to section 551.0891, paragraph 1 of the Texas Government Code to deliberate regarding security devices concerning security assessments or deployments related to information resource technology. Council may convene into executive closed session pursuant to section 551.8087 of the Texas Government Code to discuss economic development incentives for Project Harbor. Council may convene into closed executive session pursuant to section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code to discuss the city manager recruitment process. Time now is 5:23.
So